this thing with Micah Parsons is just fascinating to me because as a personnel guy, I mean, you've been to all these schools and stuff, and you're sitting there, you're thinking, man, have I seen him rush the passer? Have I seen him do this? Have I seen him do that? And it's kind of one of those things where I don't necessarily, watching the Penn State tape myself, have seen all the things that the Cowboys are doing with him. I mean, how as a personnel guy, is it something that you see this when you're evaluating the player, or am I just I didn't watch the right tape?
No, I hear you. It's a great concept, and it's a really a good discussion, I think, because really, as you know, scouting is really identifying traits, and I think this is a great example of it. You didn't see the finished product when Micah was at Penn State. In fact, you didn't see him line up in half the fashion that Dallas is using him to line up in. But what you could see is a little bit of the individual skill sets and traits, and then you had to extrapolate on those, if that makes any sense. And I give credit to the Cowboy scouts because they saw things that others didn't necessarily see. And then to get him there, and I give credit to the coaching staff, to give him a position where he can advance his skill sets to do the things that he really does well and accelerate those into the positives and not have him do the things he struggled with, although I can't see much he's struggling with at this stage. So, yeah, it's a process. And I think good scouts find those traits. You see it a lot with offensive linemen nowadays because everybody's in the spread, right? Nobody has their hand on the ground. Nobody comes off the ball anymore. So you've got to find, sometimes it's as simple as bending traits and you know, the way you sink your butt and some of the little basic things that offensive linemen do. You just have to then put that into your scheme when you get them at the NFL level. So it's a little bit of finding a ruby in the rough and then polishing it up when you get it.
When you watch the Cowboys play, and we talk about the offense so much, but we're not pointing the finger directly at Dak Prescott. The offensive line hasn't been good. The receivers have been dropping balls. The running backs have been banged up. Is there something you could kind of say, hey, the Cowboys offensively, you know, from your vantage point, need to do this differently in order to have some better success that they had earlier in the year?
Well, I definitely think they need a little reboot. There's no doubt about that. I think they've got away from the physicality of the way they ran the ball. Not that just they haven't, but just the way they have. But to that end, Dak's got to play better too. I mean, the interceptions he threw in the Washington football game were unacceptable. You just can't do that. But having said this, I actually went back, Brian, and looked at some tape before he broke his leg, and then this year after he came back from that, and then after the calf injury as well. There's a little favoring there. He just looks a little off to me. There's some hesitation there. I think there's a little bit of unconscious favoring of the calf. But what I also see is a less confident Dak for whatever reason. Maybe it's the receivers not being on the same page. Maybe it's the reads. He's not fully comfortable reading the coverage for some reason. But I see him coming off of that initial receiver way earlier than he used to, and just not really having the definitive decision-making confidence that's made him Dak Prescott. So there's something missing there, but I don't think there's anything to panic about. I think they'll get it back, but I do think, to answer your question, that the offense needs a little reboot, something to kind of re-energize what they're doing for sure.
Okay, you've sat in that seat for a long time, that GM seat. I wanted to ask you this because we mentioned about Dan Quinn and we got Kellen Moore here. And so you're looking to hire a head coach off another team. Are you looking for a defensive coordinator type of a coach, or are you looking for an offensive coordinator? Because everybody here is kind of worried about, early in the season, it was about losing Kellen Moore, and now it's worried about losing Dan Quinn. But as a general manager, when you're trying to hire, are you leaning one way or another? Is it because of your roster that you're going to make this hire?
I'm not leaning it toward either, to be honest with you. I want to set the criteria with ownership. In other words, we may have 5 or 6 different criterion set, and then we're going to go out and hire the best coach that fits that criteria. If he's offense, great. If he's defense, great. But part of that is what kind of staff he's going to be able to put together. So sometimes these NFL teams end up hiring an offensive guy because there's no other offensive guys available. You know, so they're trying to beat the rest of the competition because there's no offensive coordinators in their mind. So if they make one a head coach, then they can check 2 boxes. So sometimes you get in trouble doing that. I'm going to first and foremost look for a leader of men and kind of work backwards from that. I want a guy that's been to a Super Bowl. You know, again, it depends on what criteria you and the ownership and anybody else that's involved wants to set. So I think that's the big thing. And in those cases, you know, obviously Dan has a lot more skins on the wall and a bigger body of work than the offensive coordinator. So I think you're dependent on who the GM is. I think Kellen probably only fits to maybe some experience and some guys who can fill in the blanks for the things that he hasn't experienced. In Dan's case, he could probably go anywhere because he's been to and done that, if that makes any sense.
Randy, if you were, if you say you were the general manager of the Cowboys, and they're in a situation right now where Tony Pollard is clearly a better player right now carrying the football than Ezekiel Elliott. As a general manager, do you go into the coaching staff and make a suggestion that, like, listen, you guys think about we need to play Tony more? Or is that something that you just kind of step back and let the coaches handle the playing time of the players?
I would stay out of it completely. I would let the coaches handle it. I don't want to get in the middle of that. You're paying them to win the game, and I think they have all the ideas they want in their own room. They don't need me coming in and telling them. If I'm seeing it, there's a good chance they're seeing it. Mm-hmm. And I probably would have had the discussion with the head coach as well at some point, but I would never tell him who to play and how much to play him. I think that stuff sorts it out, and your locker room knows that. They kind of lead you to know who the players are.